In the quiet corridors of human thought, comparison moves like an unseen tyrant. It whispers into the ears of those who seek to measure their worth against another, igniting envy, resentment, and despair. Yet comparison, though seemingly natural to human beings, is not an innocent act. In the penetrating vision of Friedrich Nietzsche, comparison emerges as a corrosive force, one that diminishes individuality, poisons the will, and enslaves the spirit. Through Nietzsche's eyes, we come to see that true freedom demands not merely the rejection of comparison, but the transcendence of it. It seems harmless at first, natural, even admirable. How else, we ask, are we to know who we are, if not by contrast with others? Yet, in the keen vision of Friedrich Nietzsche, comparison reveals itself as a silent poison, a force that deforms the soul, cripples authentic becoming, and binds humanity to the most pitiable forms of self-betrayal. We compare because we are uncertain. The tree does not compare itself to another tree. The river does not measure its worth against another river. Only man, cursed with consciousness and shame, invents an endless mirror in which to see himself not as he is, but as he is not. From his earliest writings in Human, all too human to his later, more violent proclamations in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and on the genealogy of morality, Nietzsche hammers upon a single truth. The spirit of comparison is not merely childish, it is enslaving. It transforms the will to create into the will to imitate, the will to grow into the will to compete, and the joy of selfhood into the resentment of difference. At the root of comparison lies a fundamental insecurity, the suspicion that we are not enough as we are. This suspicion becomes a need. The need becomes a habit. The habit becomes a prison. Nietzsche would have us recognize this prison, not to despair of it, but to smash its walls and stride out into the wild, terrifying freedom beyond. To understand the violence comparison inflicts upon the soul, we must first understand ressentiment, the hidden engine of slave morality. Nietzsche teaches us that when human beings find themselves powerless to affirm their own worth directly, they turn instead to the poison strategy of denial. Rather than declaring, "I am strong, I am good, I am life-affirming," the resentful soul declares, "You are evil, you are oppressive, you are wrong." It is a morality built not on strength but on injury, not on creation but on negation. Comparison is the first stage of this sickness. In comparing oneself to another and finding oneself wanting, one generates an inner wound. That wound festers into resentment, and resentment demands a new moral world in which the comparison is inverted. The weak are holy, the suffering are righteous, and the mediocre are morally superior to the excellent. Thus entire systems of values, religions, political ideologies, ethical codes arise, founded not on the spontaneous joy of existence but on the sour grapes of defeat. Christianity, for Nietzsche, is the grand masterpiece of ressentiment. It sanctifies meekness, poverty, and self-denial, precisely because it was birthed from a powerless community who could not conquer the Romans by strength and thus conquered them by moral inversion. But the danger is not only historical. It is intimate, personal, immediate. Every time we compare ourselves to another and feel envy rather than inspiration, resentment rather than admiration, we participate anew in the ancient sickness. We reforge our own chains. In Nietzsche's time, comparison was already a powerful social force, visible in class structures, religious dogmas, and social hierarchies. But what would he say if he saw the modern world, where comparison has been industrialized, globalized, weaponized? Social media has made comparison instantaneous and infinite. At every moment, we are confronted with curated images of others' triumphs, their beauty, their success, their joy. The soul barely has time to breathe before it is measured, found wanting, and chastised. Nietzsche's herd has become the digital swarm, an endless marketplace of images where value is conferred not by inner worth, but by external likes, shares, and comments. The result is a profound spiritual exhaustion. To live in constant comparison is to live in constant war against oneself. It is to wake each morning not asking, "What wants to grow within me today?" but rather, "How do I rank against the infinite others?" Nietzsche would recognize in this phenomenon the acceleration of slave morality. A world where true individuality is drowned under the weight of endless mirrors. What does it mean to live without authenticity? It means to live reactively rather than actively. The reactive man does not create new values. He reacts to the values of others. He does not forge his own path. He copies the successful. He does not listen to the quiet voice within. He shouts in the noise of the crowd. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche gives voice to the overman, the figure who has transcended the reactive spirit. The overman does not measure himself by others. He measures himself by his own becoming. He does not seek approval. He seeks self-overcoming. His joy is not in conquest over others, but in the tireless unfolding of his own potential. The authentic life, then, is not a life without struggle. It is a life without reactive comparison. It is a life where struggle is directed inward, not outward. It is a life where the question is never, am I better than him? But always, am I more myself than I was yesterday? If comparison corrupts morality, it also corrupts art. True creation demands solitude, strangeness, risk. Yet when the artist begins to compare his work to the fashions of the time, to the accolades won by others, to the approval of critics, he ceases to be a creator and becomes a manufacturer. Nietzsche understood art as the highest expression of the will to power. Not the will to dominate, but the will to give form to chaos, to wrest beauty from the void. True art cannot be born in comparison. It is born in the fierce isolation of the soul daring to dance with the abyss. Thus, to live as an artist, whether in paint, in word, in deed, is to live beyond comparison. It is to refuse to measure one's voice against the cacophony of the herd and to trust, with terrifying courage, that one's song is worth singing simply because it must be sung. Is it possible to heal from the tyranny of comparison? Nietzsche's answer is both brutal and exhilarating. Yes, but only through a radical revaluation of values. We must learn to despise the craving for approval as a weakness. We must cultivate a fierce pride in standing alone. We must embrace failure, ridicule, obscurity, not as punishments, but as necessary rites of passage toward authenticity. Above all, we must cultivate gratitude not for being better than others, but for the mere fact of being at all. Gratitude for breath, for struggle, for becoming. Gratitude for the absurd privilege of being a self in a world where so many are content to be shadows. To live beyond comparison is to accept that life is not a race, not a tournament, not a ledger of achievements. Life is a great becoming, a dance, a risk, a flame. Nietzsche's great exhortation was not merely to think differently but to live differently. To become who you are, without apology, without reference, without measure. To become a law unto yourself. To plant your flag not in the territory of others, but in the uncharted land of your own soul. In this way, we do not merely escape comparison. We escape the very metaphysics of comparison. We cease to think in terms of better and worse, superior and inferior. We think in terms of fullness, of flowering, of force. We no longer ask, how high have I climbed? But rather, how deeply have I lived? Perhaps the true sign that we have escaped comparison is laughter. Not the laughter of mockery or superiority, but the deep, belly-shaking laughter of one who has seen through the game entirely. The laughter of one who knows that all rankings are illusions, all competitions are farces, all measurements are meaningless compared to the simple, thunderous fact of existence. Nietzsche envisioned such a spirit. Light, dancing, playful, deadly serious and utterly free. A spirit who has forgotten how to compare because he is too busy creating, too busy living, too busy laughing. This is the final freedom. Not to defeat others, not to surpass others, but to forget others altogether. Not in cruelty, but in a joyful, overflowing affirmation of one's own path. And so we return to the beginning. Comparison is a tyranny, but it is a tyranny we can overthrow. Not with violence, not with resentment, but with laughter, with creation, with becoming. In the words Nietzsche might have spoken, had he lived to see our age, become incomparable. Thank you for accompanying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so we can discuss. Wish you and your family good health.